folks, Ryan here. It's February the 20th, 2024. Well, guess what happened 15,000 years ago? Well, it was a seminal event in our species' history. What happened was the ice sheets of North America, Europe, and Siberia all melted. And it was the beginning of the Pliocene period, the interglacial period. Now, what triggered this melting? Well, if you ask GPT-4, it says CO2, but that's patently absurd, given that CO2 levels were around 190 parts per million to 200 parts per million. So, and we know that from the ice core samples. So it wasn't CO2, and it sure in the hell wasn't us. So, what did cause it? Nobody knows. Nobody can state definitively why. There's some theories. I'll get into that in a minute. But one of the things that was a real mystery at that time was the Canadian ice sheet, the Laurentide ice sheet, the one that was over from the stretch from the Rocky Mountains down south to the southern U.S.-Canada border, all the way across and over to Greenland. It was huge, massive. Now, if you take your ice cubes and you throw them into a glass of whiskey, a nice big glass of whiskey, they melt from the outside in, right? Well, it turns out this Canadian ice sheet decided to go the other way. Now, to do that, you would need almost a blowtorch, a volcano, or an asteroid, or a comet, or something in the middle of it being the Hudson Bay, to make it melt. Well, there is no volcano, no sign of an impact crater at all. But this is what happened. It melted from the inside and worked its way out. And all the way out towards the Rocky Mountains and around by the state of Washington, Idaho, and all the way across and over to Greenland. Now, it reached a certain point as it melted, and it only took 1,500 years apparently. Yeah, 1,500 years. This whole massive glacier. Do you know how much energy that takes? It's huge. Anyway, so this thing melts, and as it gets to the edges, the edges, of course, are getting thinner and thinner and thinner until they start to, what happens on your ice cubes again in your whiskey glass? They float up. Yes, and so the edges start to float up. And when that happens, of course, it breaks underneath and the lake leaks out. So when it does that, it causes probably the Great Flood, the one that resulted in a 400-foot sea level very suddenly. And areas like the Black Sea got flooded. Areas like the area between Australia and Papua New Guinea, which we've just found out, we used to be cultivated. It was a big area of cities and civilization in there. So that all disappeared, as did the land bridge from Asia to North America. So the sea levels haven't been the same since, because as the weight of the ice came off of the continents, they of course rose. And the sea levels rose, and they've been kind of bobbing back and forth ever since, and we still have the changing sea levels all over the world, and in fact probably more rising than anything else, because basically we've had global warming for 15,000 years. Isn't that something? If you listen to the folks today about climate warming and the climate crisis, they'll tell you it's only since we had the industrial age that that's been the case. Well, we know from Dr. Happer that the CO2 that's been going in from so-called fossil fuels has really negligible effect when you go from 200 to 400 to 800 parts per million. And we're at 400 today. And the results are very positive for the CO2 effect. So as a physicist, he's demonstrated, and the IPCC has recreated the numbers, they agree that there's very little impact of CO2 on us, because it certainly didn't cause the big ice sheets. That's just a fact of life. So the other thing that's been going on is that we've had warming periods in the last 15,000 years. There was the Roman warming period and the cooling period too. We had the Little Ice Age, and it turned out that there is the Thames River froze, and in Holland the Grand Masters were showing all of these paintings with people skating in Holland and everywhere else in Europe. So we also had cooling with a 535 AD, when there was likely an asteroid and or a volcano, and more likely a volcano out of Indonesia, that caused a cooling period for at least 3 years of no crops. In those days, I was devastating. If we had a similar kind of thing happen today, we have the technology to react to that, and we could survive that, because we've learned. We're a pretty cool species. We're the only species now on the planet that can protect the planet from these asteroids. Yeah, that's right. We have space defense. So, things are moving along pretty much in our favor, and I think it's a great idea. And as I said earlier, I love global warming. I think Canada's way too cold. I'm delighted with this El Nino effect, and the El Nino effect is really a representative of the changing climate as well. I'm sure we're going to have a La Nina, which is cold water off the Pacific. Now we've got the warm water, and I'll take it. It's been a year now here in Calgary that we've had this, basically what we call a Chinook or a snow eater here, and it's been wonderful. What a great way to go. Anyway, we have lots of things that have been going on in the climate narrative, carbon taxes and everything else. The World Forum, and we got to do this and that and everything else. No, I don't think so. I think their agendas are full of it, and I think what we really ought to be doing is being prepared to adapt. And that's what we've done forever in our history. Even when we were down to 1,280 breeding pairs of our species, I think that we've adapted and adapted well, and we can do it again. And as I say, we can defend the planet now from asteroids and other foreign debris, and we can do all sorts of things. So folks, the climate narrative, I think, has to change. Please, I ask you, keep an open mind on all of this. It's not set in concrete. No, if anybody gives you a definitive answer that this is the way it has to be and is, well, it's not. So keep an open mind, and God bless.